Welcome back to the Chip Shot Football Podcast here, and not really bringing up any necessary, breaking news or any storylines really. I wanted to bring up this topic that it kind of popped into my head, I think a day or two ago, and it really started kind of developing when I saw the Steelers play the Jets and just how, we went back almost a decade and saw an old matchup between these two veteran quarterbacks, Russell Wilson against Aaron Rodgers. You think NFC Conference Championship game like 2014, around that time, where these guys were really on the top of the quarterback world right now, right? Or at that time, I should say. And the game just a couple weeks ago ended, and the result and what we saw on the field was sort of a small microcosm of the situations that we now see with Russ and with Aaron Rodgers, right? Two veteran quarterbacks, and like I said before, it's made me think, and I think it makes everyone think, that when you look at these two scenarios, right, how similar they are in a sense that you have two veteran quarterbacks that were traded to new environments, to elevate and be sort of that final piece to the puzzle for the Steelers or the Jets respectively. And they've had very different outcomes so far. One's been coming off of a pretty severe injury. Another one just kind of fell off of the face of the earth a little bit, just in terms of results and the situation there in Denver. Russ had a very bad time there in his first year there with Nathaniel Hackett and everything like that. It looked very bad. And then for Aaron Rodgers, coming off of that injury, devastating news for a guy at that age. Similarly as devastating as with Russ, just seeming like he just wasn't good anymore. But now this year, both of them had new opportunities. Technically Rodgers, because he didn't play in his first year, but this year was really the first year for these two new guys to kind of right the ship, prove their Hall of Fame, legacy that they have been building up over their career. They had a new chance to prove it now to help new organizations, get to where they wanted to go with, experienced signal callers coming in there. But we've seen very different outcomes for what seems to be pretty similar scenarios with two similar quarterbacks heading into similar new environments. Different outcomes, right? You have a 6-2 team and you have a 2-6 team, right? Why is that? Surely both would make seamless transitions at this point and dominate right away. At least that's what the expectations were for the Jets, right? I'm not so sure maybe for the Steelers, but you'd expect better outcomes, right, from a team led by Aaron Rodgers, just from the MVPs and the skill set and everything like that. So you get to looking at what each quarterback was walking into so far, right, to kind of piece together this puzzle. You look at the Jets. Aaron Rodgers was stepping into a scenario where we looked at a very new offensive line, bringing in new veteran guys that were supposed to make this offensive line better. They are better, I would say that. A top-tier defense, right? That was the narrative around the Jets. Sauce Gardner, Quincy Williams, Will McDonald now. We didn't really know about him back then, but he's a very good player. C.J. Mosley, they have talented players on that defense. A great up-and-coming number one kind of wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, a great running back in Breece Hall as well. And that was at the beginning of the season, right? Not later on now, obviously, bringing in Devontae Adams and whatnot. There's a lot of good there to expect with the Jets, right? It seems like this has to work with everything that they've invested in the offseason. And what was already there, obviously. And then you look at the Steelers, maybe not as convincing, right? You look at an improving offensive line starting now with two rookies, ideally, a right guard that was injured and now is out for the rest of the year. One of their other rookies, their right tackle, is also out probably for the entire regular season. And if he was healthy, the Steelers offense would be starting three rookies on their offensive line. So not the kind of experience that you see with the Jets. Also, you had a good wide receiver number one with George Pickens, that's similar. A good running back, with Najee Harris. A great defense, just like the Jets. And a new offensive coordinator also. So there's a lot of, getting to know what the system is, what Arthur Smith was going to bring to this team. That was something that was another hurdle for the Steelers, if you would. So then, like I mentioned, the Jets get Devontae Adams and everything like that. And still, two pretty good scenarios, right, for the Steelers and the Jets, but still, it doesn't answer too much why we see such different results. If anything, you'd expect the Jets to be a little bit better, right? But that hasn't been the case. So we look at the stats so far and how these quarterbacks have been performing. Aaron Rodgers is 8th in passing yards at 1,896, 9th in touchdowns at 12, tied for 3rd in interceptions, though, with 7. He has a 61% completion percentage and is a 61% completion percentage, which is one of the worst for starting quarterbacks so far in 2024. And now, not to compare it to Russ because he's only played 2 games, but Russ, for what it's worth, has a 63% completion percentage, 542 passing yards, 0 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, all in only 2 games so far. But it's felt like his insertion into this Steelers team has already felt and looked better than what Aaron Rodgers is doing in New York. But just watching and kind of making our own conclusions off of what we've seen, Russ is looking better than Aaron Rodgers at the moment. And why has it not worked out, is the question. I believe because the main reason here, right, we finally get to the answer. In my opinion, I just feel like the view or the responsibility of each quarterback has been different, even though they are in similar points of their careers. Obviously, Russ doesn't have the MVPs that Aaron Rodgers does, but Russ is like 34, 35 years old, coming off of, in just recent memory, one of the worst years of his career professionally, performance-wise. And with Aaron Rodgers, 40 years old, coming off of a pretty bad injury. Similar sort of guys, right? But they've been thrown into situations that I think are very different, and both of these guys have different responsibilities, which I believe has led to different outcomes and how one looks drastically different than the other, right? All last season, starting with the Jets, we heard that the Jets were just a quarterback away. Once Aaron Rodgers got there, the rumors started to swirl around. This team was going to be Super Bowl bound. They just needed a quarterback, right? And who better than Aaron Rodgers? In other words, they would win. In other words, they would win just because of the fact that they have Aaron Rodgers, right? Once Aaron Rodgers was a Jet, they figured they were going to win just because they had Aaron Rodgers, the legendary, talented Aaron Rodgers. And not to say that he's not that, but the responsibility right away you see there is that they expect to win because of Aaron. Everything is on Aaron, right? If something's going to work or if this thing is going to fail, like we've seen, it's going to be mostly on Aaron. So the support really isn't there, in other words, also. So logically, if you think about the pressure already on Aaron Rodgers, if you just take away the name, you put all that pressure on a 40-year-old quarterback after having a severe injury the year before that. It is realistic now, looking at the results, that there is going to be a lot of challenges just to win solely because of Aaron. Not really has worked out for them and not ready to add or complement what he's been able to bring thus far, right? I think they've put, and it sounds a little bit hypocritical or outlandish a little bit to say that they've put too much responsibility on Aaron Rodgers, but I think that's fair because it's the name holds a lot of weight, obviously, right? It's historic for what he's done, but even still, you can't just expect Aaron to do everything and be so surprised when the 40-year-old quarterback, again, coming off of a bad injury, isn't looking quite like himself at this point in his career. You can't be so surprised just because he is Aaron Rodgers, right? Father Time hasn't lost yet, so that's a real thing. Whereas in other scenarios, you look at other teams that are, presumably better than the Jets right now, and you look at the fact that it's just hard for any team realistically to just win because of their quarterback, right? I think the Jets, that was their mindset. We're going to win because we have Aaron Rodgers. Whereas I think other teams would tell you the Ravens don't just win because of Lamar. The Bills don't just win just because they have Josh Allen. The Chargers also, they don't just win because they have Justin Herbert, right? Those are three of the most talented guys, just as talented pretty much as Aaron. Maybe not throwing the football, but running, the accuracy, everything's all there for three of those guys, and they have all the talent to help their team, right? Like Aaron does, but they could win a lot of games because of their talents, but really, you look at what really matters and the trophies, the Super Bowls, and the accomplishments and everything like that. Josh Allen hasn't been to a Super Bowl, hasn't won a conference championship. Lamar hasn't been to the Super Bowl. Justin's only been in the first round of the playoffs. So no good team just wins because of their quarterback, right? It's very hard to do that in such a team-oriented sport. And you also even look at teams like the Lions, I could throw in there, the Steelers, the Vikings, the Chiefs even, how they've made it their goal to kind of focus on what surrounds the quarterback, right? You look at the Chiefs, great defense. They're a running team now, right? They don't just win because Patrick is extremely talented, right? If they did, they probably wouldn't be undefeated, right? If they didn't have a great running game, if they didn't have a great defense, they wouldn't be undefeated at this point. The Vikings, right? They don't have the talented quarterback like the Aaron Rodgers, like Josh Allen, right? But they have great play calling, a very good defense, great offensive line, great running game, great receivers. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. So, they don't just win because of their quarterback. The Lions, same thing. Jared Goff is very good, but they don't win the way that they do without that offensive line, without the identity, the ideas of Ben Johnson, the culture that Dan Campbell has brought. And the Ravens, too. Last year, they're a good team with Lamar, with whatever he brings, but they're a true contender now this year because they brought in Derrick Henry, right? They have an identity, they have a running game, and a good defense. I think that is really the difference here with all these situations, even including, like I mentioned, the Steelers with Russ and how we started this whole thing, right? The Steelers really made it a point of emphasis to they were committed to the running game, right? That's why they brought in Arthur Smith. They were going to be a run-heavy team. They knew they had a great defense, even with their receivers, right? The receivers aren't necessarily some of the best group in the NFL, right? And their quarterback, Russell Wilson's coming in. He's a good player. He's experienced, has everything like that. But they made it a point to have a great running game, have a great defense, and know how to win games. That is the ultimate goal, right? And just by having Russ, I always like to compare it to like a house, right? The quarterback is ideally the roof, right? You can have a great house, you can build a great foundation, great everything about the house, right? A running game, great defense, offensive line, everything, right? But if you don't have a roof, if you don't have that quarterback, that house really isn't really worth that much, right? This team really isn't worth, contention if you don't have a great quarterback. But in the other way, if you have a great quarterback, if you build the roof first and kind of ignore all the other things, the house really isn't going to stand a chance when, tougher challenges come, down the road and things like that, right? It's going to crumble. So the roof, the quarterback should really be the last thing to enhance every other thing that you've done very well. And I think the Jets, why it hasn't really worked out for them, to kind of point it out, is the fact that I think it's been too much emphasis on just getting a great roof, just getting a great quarterback, right? That's going to fix everything, right? But they've negated the other pieces, right? Their defense really hasn't been living up to expectations, right? Bringing in Devontae Adams hasn't worked out too well. The running game, the offensive line, and it's struggling a little bit now, and they're not getting the results. And even Aaron Rodgers, right? That roof is a little bit leaky, right? It's missing some throws. It just doesn't look quite the same. It's still a great roof, right? It's a great quarterback and everything, but I think they've negated some of the other things, the coaching and whatnot and everything like that. We could go on, but I think that's really the main reason. The expectations, the responsibilities on Aaron, not to, take away any blame from him, because certainly he's been pretty bad. He'd say that himself, but I think the Jets have just kind of overestimated what to expect from just one guy, and thinking that he was just going to cover everything up isn't realistic. The name holds a lot of weight, but the 40-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles injury is a tough sell, and I think that's coming through right now in their results and in their season so far. So I wanted to point that out just because what the Jets have been this year has really been mind-boggling to me. So I've thought about it, and that's the best answer I could give. So we'll leave that there. And for the last segment here, just quickly after the break, I had to preview the Lions and the Packers game coming up. We're going to do more of the predictions tomorrow, but this game has a lot expected of it. There's a lot of anticipation for this game, just for me personally. So we're going to preview it and pick a winner, go through the matchups and whatnot when we return after this quick break.